I want to welcome all of you who came today to take some time out of your busy schedule to just have a conversation about the tech sector and perhaps some different career paths you may consider, and really hear perspectives from our great panelists tonight. And we have three professionals here with different who've taken different paths and different levels of experience and educational experiences to offer. And so for our students here tonight, I just encourage you to be attentive and engaged and ask questions as you have them. Feel free to put them in the text box, or you can raise your hand. Happy to we can do that as well with the smaller group tonight. And for how this is going to work tonight, we're going to start off with I think we'll start with introductions of our students real quick. If you could just give us your name and your major, what year you are. And if you have an idea of, a certain path that interests you within tech, that would help our panelists sort of figure out, maybe how to direct their comments a little bit more intentionally. And once we get through that, then we'll turn it over to the panelists. And we have about 35 minutes of specific questions I'm going to pose to them. And then we're going to open up to any other questions you may have. So does that sound good to everybody? Okay, by the way, I'm Kristen Irwin. I'm the Assistant Director for Career Learning Communities here at the Malone Center for Career Engagement. And I do serve as a liaison to a couple of different departments like computer science and math and business and econ and a couple others as well. So and maybe I've presented to your class before, or maybe we've met before with appointments. So definitely encourage you guys, if you need any assistance, to reach out. And my colleague Steve Harrison is here, and he's sort of running things behind the scenes tonight. And he's our Assistant Director for Employer Relations. Thanks for being here. So let's see. Nicholas, would you mind start kicking us off and introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nick Robbins. I'm a computer science major, a junior, and yeah, I'd like to go the software development route. That's about it.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Like Patrick, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, I'm Patrick McDonough, also a junior computer science major, and like the software engineering route or something like that.
Okay, good deal. Let's see, Ryan, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a chemistry major. I'm a junior here at Furman, and I'm still exploring certain paths. So I'm not really sure yet.
Great. Good thing to be here tonight for that reason. Rebecca, are you there?
Yes. Hi, I'm Rebecca Wilhelmi. I am a senior applied math and computer science major, and I'm interested in data analytics.
Cool. Let's see, John, are you there? Back in a second. Is it Kushi? Did I say that right? I'm sorry if I.
Yes. Hi, my name's Kushi Patel. I'm a freshman, and I'm thinking about majoring in computer science.
Thank you, Kushi. John is saying he's in a noisy place and his mic, he can't turn on his mic. So I'm telling him he can enter his intro in the chat box.
Cool.
Is it Tiana or Tiana?
Tiana.
Tiana?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a senior IT major, and I'm thinking the software developer side.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Let's see, Ryan? We already did Ryan, didn't we? Okay. And Jennifer, I know you're not a student, but feel free to introduce yourself if you'd like. She's there. Okay, she says her audio is acting up, but I work at Tresata with Pat, actually showing some Tresata support. Happy to be here. And John says, I'm actually a computer science alum, but this was recommended to me by the Career Center I've been speaking with, and it seemed like a great opportunity. So we've got a mix here of different students and alums and interests and paths. So that's great. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. And if you wouldn't mind real quick, just giving us a quick little intro about who you are, where you work, what you do, that would be awesome. So I'll start with you, Claudine, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, I'm Claudine Beshart, and I'm an 83 alum of Furman. And I've been in software engineering for 30 years. So I seen it all. I started out on a mid-range. I've done mainframe work. I work on distributed systems now. So I've seen a lot and done a lot of platforms, a lot of languages. And one thing I want to tell you, Furman people, is that your education at Furman, it's a great start. There are things that I learned at Furman, work ethic, everything that I use today. So, you know, I'm just so happy that you invited me because I really feel that a lot of my success was due to Furman. So that's it.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. Jake, would you mind go next?
Sure. Hey guys, I am Jake Sane. I am a 2016 Furman alum, and I'm an account executive, which means sales at Qualtrics, a global tech company. Trying to think what else is relevant in this introduction. Are we supposed to talk about our path to how we get here now, Kristen? Or should we
You
sort of
can
go like
talk
that?
a little bit about that. The next question might get into that a little bit too, but
Okay. Yeah. So at Furman, I actually majored in information technology, but I was always more interested in like, what are the psychological impacts of this? You know, what are the social impacts, and how can we take like technology and harness that to improve a business process? And so what, you know, that always interested me more, in the programming side of things, which I'm sure you guys are great at, or a lot of you are great at, wasn't my cup of tea. And so that translated to sales in terms of like taking a software technology and talking to other business professionals. And I couldn't be more of an advocate for everything I did at Furman and for a liberal arts education in order to get into the technology space. Because regardless of the job function that you have, you need some of those underlying leadership skills, working with people, being able to tell a story, being part of a team, and that can sell you very well. So I guess I'll leave it there for now, and then I could talk more the full path. Next question.
thanks, Jake. What about you, Pat?
Hey everyone, my name is Pat Sellers, and I hold a number of hats at Tresata. The one I'm wearing tonight is I lead recruitment at Tresata, and in addition to that, I head our learning academy, Tresata Academy, and I'm also director of operations. Tresata is not a huge company; we have about 40 people, so everybody wears multiple hats. So that's part of why I have all these different responsibilities. My path to Tresata was very non-traditional. I graduated from Davidson in 1986, you know, the school right up the road from you all, and did a number of things, but eventually came back to Davidson to teach political science I guess it was in 2000. Did a number of things at Davidson from administrative standpoint and otherwise, and in I guess 2018, I decided I wanted to try something different again, and Tresata was looking for somebody to do some of the things that I do. So we connected, and here I am, and I'm very happy to wax eloquent about all the benefits of liberal arts education in general, but I think particularly for the tech industry. I think I completely agree with Jake and Claudine about the how the education that you all are getting right now is going to position you really well for your first job and your next job and your job after that. And I think one of the things we're going to be able to do tonight is both show you how that works, but also show you how you can maximize the impact of that education. At least that's what I hope we can do.
Yeah. So, I mean, Pat, you just talked a little bit about, you know, how you kind of got where you are today. You know, Jake and Claudine, I'd kind of be curious about that too. And just for all of you, were there any unexpected detours that you've hit along the way? You know, whether you've been working for a few years or, you know, for a longer career. It's just sort of, I like to hear sometimes how, you know, you just, everyone certainly needs to be proactive in sort of their career and job planning, but sometimes some unexpected things happen or fate kind of comes into play. So I would just love to hear if you have any of those scenarios or situations so far that you've encountered.
I do. We interviewed a guy a couple years ago for a software engineering job. And I remember being in the interviewing him with my manager. And my manager was not impressed because the guy took a whole year off. Young guy took a whole year off from technology. And I don't know what he did, but then he decided to go back into software engineering. And they were like, no, we can't have this guy. He didn't do anything that year. It didn't bother me one whit because my detour was I spent 7 years at home with my children and I went right back in. But the world had changed a little bit then, you know, it was more Java and Python, those kind of things. But you can learn anything. You go from, you can learn anything. So, you know, to me, I would have hired the guy, but they were not impressed. I'm just telling you guys that that was my detour, and you guys can do it. If you want to spend 7 years, 10 years with your children at home, do it. You can go back in. I did. So that's what my story is.
Mhm.
Yeah, I echo and kind of follow along with that, Claudine. I think in any job that you go into, you have to be expecting that there's going to be changes. What you initially went into might not be the career path that you find, but I think that's more emphasized in technology. Technology is a high-paced, rapid changing space, whether you're working for a big company or a small company. You often find yourself, like Pat said, you're going to wear multiple hats at a smaller company, but at a big company, you have a lot of job mobility. And like Qualtrics, for example, I've been here 5 years, my whole career, but I've been here longer than 90% of employees. You know, and that's the technology space. In general, it's where growth is happening. And if you start with a technology company, you can always go to another industry. And my sort of, I think my sidestep that might be atypical is that I started in a sales development role, just cold calling all day, other businesses. And there's some fun in that, but any entry level job is a grind. And before I promoted to become an account executive, I served in a recruiting role for just 4 months. And I knew it was a temporary thing. I'd already hit my promotion metrics. I was a recruiter and just worked with that team to find new entry level sales people. And I think that's the sort of opportunity that you can get in a lot of tech companies, but also the flexibility where you could have side job mobility. So I think about starting at a great company too, where you know, it's not a straightforward career trajectory or path. Maybe the company embodies a lot of the values that you care about, and there's different directions that you go. I was thinking, Rebecca, when you said data analytics, I mean, data analytics could be, there's a whole sales data analytics team at Qualtrics, but there's also a data analytics team for our product. And then there's another data analytics team for support. And who knows which direction that ends up being.
Yes, I agree with everything that Jake mentioned. You know, arguably we should have a graduation requirement for some sort of data fluency, because it's sort of like writing. You really need to understand how to code, how to use data if you really want to be able to operate and communicate effectively in this world right now, because it's so incredibly important. So I agree with what you're saying, Jake. From my standpoint, probably my biggest detour was actually coming to Tresata. At Davidson, I was a tenured faculty member, done a lot of administrative work, and I was, you know, on a pretty easy and cool path. But I just decided that, you know, going back to what you were saying, Kristen, about how some things that you may have initially enjoyed, you may not enjoy as much. I really enjoyed teaching, but I wanted to try something different, and Tresata has been incredibly different on so many different levels. And you can imagine, just from your classroom experiences versus work experiences, it's that really in spades. And the data part of it is one of the most exciting things, because there's so many different ways you can apply data, from software engineering to human resources to finance to sales to recruitment. All these areas are potential for using data, and if you have some ability in that, those are possible ways for you to try to get into the tech field. And as Jake was saying, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of opportunities for growth and development. And so like the path that Claudine followed, that's definitely viable. And there are lots of other paths too. I think one of the key things is sort of motivation and continuing to learn and being flexible and the kind of work you're willing to do.
There's so many areas, you know, there's like cybersecurity, and within that you have like intrusion prevention, firewalls, dynamic threat prevention. You've got business intelligence, data analytics. you guys just, I think the students, you should just go out and look on Udemy or Pluralsight and all the other, what with edX, and just explore and see all the different courses and see all the areas that you could, probably explore, take a class and figure out what you like, because what you really want, and I think I keep telling the junior developers, you want to like your job at least 70% of the time. And most of the time you should say, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. And there are a lot of times when I go, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. This is so easy, and so it's fun. So you try to explore, because there are parts that I had no interest in. I looked at artificial intelligence and I was like, my eyes were rolling back into my head, So, yeah, but there are lots of areas that you can explore, and within those areas, you can find something that you like.
All of you have sort of mentioned liberal arts a little bit so far in your discussions, but I'd love to hear a little bit more specifically how you think liberal arts students should interconnect their education, to potential opportunities within the tech sector, regardless of path. Like maybe Jake and Claudine, how have you maybe applied your liberal arts background in ways that maybe you did or didn't anticipate? And then for Pat, when you're hiring students that have that liberal arts background, how do you see that as being an advantage?
I'll start by saying I think so much of the liberal arts background is a well-rounded base in education, but it's also everything you do outside of the classroom. And so importantly, it's how you tell that story of what you did outside of the classroom. I think whoever tells the best story and captures the lessons of those experiences ultimately can present themselves the most effectively. So like for me at Furman, I was an admissions ambassador. And I like to say that was my first experience formally selling. But at that time, I was formally selling Furman. And I think there was a lot of lessons learned that I could talk about and utilize in my experience at Qualtrics. And then there's also like internships, study abroad. I think internships are such a practical application that can easily translate into a job. So if you're not already a senior, thinking about, I had an internship where as part of that internship, I started collecting feedback from our clients because I was really passionate about it. Turns out there's a formal product to do that, Qualtrics, which helps a lot of companies measure client experience. So those internships can not only be another great story that you can tell to get a job at an employer, but to learn where those interests lie. So I think it's everything outside the classroom too is a big part of that like application where liberal arts translates to the real professional world, we'll call it.
I have to agree with you. I think all the courses that you've taken, it just all adds up to you as a complete person with more than just, your tech classes or your science classes. It's your communication skills, your written communication skills, verbal, that all adds up. And I think with the liberal arts experience, you get exposed to, do y'all still have that the thing where you have to go to all these
CLPs?
Yes, CLPs. I remember that. And that I hated it when I went to Furman, but I'm so glad that I went to all of them and graduated. So that was great now when I think about it, and it will help you later.
Yes, particularly when you're applying for a job. I think this in the recruiting we do at Tresata, I think this illustrates several things. First of all, the internship program is really, really influential. Whatever kind of internship experiences you can have, that is a powerful signal about your potential for being a full-time employee. We recently did the calculations, and of Tresata's current employees, 40% were former interns at Tresata. For us, it's a huge recruiting pipeline, and it's a way for us to get to know the intern or the person, and for them to get to know us. Then ultimately, you really want you really want to find the best match, because it didn't help anybody, the company or the employee, if it's not a good match. So I think that's a big part of a lot of the way recruiting should operate. And I think we value liberal arts students because of the diverse backgrounds they bring, like Claudine was talking about, going to see these the public events, all the different kind of classes that you took. You all are sort of CS, data science, computer science, data science minors or majors. You've probably had to write English papers or religion papers, things like that you really, really didn't like to write, right? It's some part of satisfying the distribution requirements. Well, that was a pain, but it pushed you in ways that helped you learn how to write for different people and in different ways. And one of the things that I've always had to do when I have different bosses, I have to adapt myself to think like they do and write like they do and work like they do. And if you all have already learned in some of your classes how to develop that, I don't know, that intellectual agility, so that you can adapt your work and your thinking to fit whatever context you have. And that is one of the reasons why we value people coming from liberal arts. They have that, they have the leadership skills and the sort of the storytelling skills. They're able to think in new and different ways, and in ways that people that just have a straight background at a purely technical school sometimes struggle with. And for our teams, when we face problems we haven't anticipated and have to try to come up with a solution, the more diverse the backgrounds and perspectives are, the people on our teams, the more likely we're going to be able to figure out the problem.
The business speak term to say work cross-functionally is what liberal arts people can do. I was thinking the whole time Pat was saying cross-functional. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Great points. I think too, as that gives us the liberal arts perspective, and obviously all these students should be selling that. But let's go to the opposite extreme. And as you're specializing in sort of technology, and for some of you who are computer science majors or IT majors or other majors, but when you're thinking about your technology background and what's necessary, today in all of your companies, I'll start with Claudine with this one. Like, what types of technology experiences or competencies do you think these students need to, successfully get that first job? And in your case, software engineering. I know there's a few students here with that interest. What do you think are some things that come to mind that are requirements in your mind, as well as things that could get them to that next level?
Oh, definitely master your fundamental, your core courses. Because, technology changes so quickly, but those fundamental courses, they're eternal. And the other thing you should do is try to take outside courses, aside from class, like the online classes. There's so many now that you can look at something and say, well, do I want to try full stack engineering and do web application development? Well, take a little class on that and see if you like that. If you don't like that, then try something else. And I think that you will find that you are good at certain things and other things you have to work at. For software engineers, I think there were at least 3 that wanted to be software engineers. Keep in mind that a lot of employers will test you. We give a test now, we didn't used to, but we give a test depending on the grade level that you're coming in on. And it's like, it's nothing that you could actually do in your job, but it tests how well you think, how you solve a problem. And that's basically what we want to know, is how well you can think quickly and solve a problem. And you get to pick your language. So for that, that's like fundamental. So even if you don't know anything about data analytics, the data science, if you're looking at a certain field, make sure that you can do the basic stuff like code. If you want to be a software engineer, you better be able to code. So we've interviewed software engineers, potential ones. They could not code. And we were shocked. So
Anything too from Jake and Pat, your perspectives of just in your areas or what you've observed working in your companies?
Yeah, I think the, whatever fundamental competencies of your discipline. I mean, Qualtrics has like a few thousand employees now, and I know in the computer science or what we call software engineering realm, there is a similar sort of competency test. And I think that's part of that, but there's also other things you're evaluated on. And just some key themes. I think Pat or maybe Claudine said learn about learning. I'd say learn to learn. It's a cliche or trite statement now, but having that growth mindset and maybe portraying that during your interview, and say, because technology is such a fast moving space that whatever competencies you come in with are not going to be relevant in 10, 15 years. You're going to be programming something completely different. And telling and talking about, hey, I've tried these 3 different classes, like Claudine said, and I was learning this, and then I learned that, and then I learned this, because that's what you have to do in the real world. And I think talking about the ability with which you can change and have speed. Speed is the currency in technology, almost to our downfall. It's all about how quickly can you learn something new and then adapt, and willingness to lean into a new change. So maybe a more big picture competencies if you're thinking from a software development standpoint, but they're also applicable for any job in technology.
I'd have to agree with everything that you all said just now. For us, one of our core values is learn to love, which is sort of what Jake was saying, but a little bit different. Everybody loves to learn. The idea of learning to love is learning how to embrace and try new different things, loving that idea of sort of pushing yourself. And I think that's really consistent with what you were saying, Jake, about pushing yourself in new areas, because that's in the tech field, things change so quickly that the skills that you have 1 year, 5 years, you're going to probably have to learn some new things. Claudine's totally right about the importance of some of these core, programming principles and things like that. But the way they manifest themselves, the particular packages just vary. And odds are some of the packages and languages that you need to learn, you're not getting in undergraduate. In terms of going back to Kristen's specific question, for our internship program, and arguably for our data engineer program, we look for at least some experience with data or programming. And that can be some of the base programming languages, or it can be, taking an econometrics or stats class. Understanding some of the basics of data, that is sort of the minimal level of knowledge we need people to know. And after that, we give people the training early in their careers. The reason we do it that way is that our core languages are Scala and Spark and working in distributed processing and Hadoop, and there aren't many schools out there that are offering training in those areas. So that in some ways brings me back to Claudine's point about the benefits of taking and learning things outside of your established classes. Sometimes, I love higher ed. I spent most of my life working in higher ed, but sometimes the incentives to update the curriculum are not as fast as they are outside in the applied tech world. And so we're having to change our platforms, our languages on a nearly constant basis just to keep up with what the potential is in the marketplace. Your professors don't have that kind of incentive. So when they create problem sets and lectures and everything in particular language, they're going to want to use those for several years, which is great because they work well and they do a really great job of teaching you those basic concepts. But if you want to keep up with the languages that are currently out there and currently in use, sometimes that requires you to go elsewhere and supplement the great liberal arts training you're getting in undergraduate with some of these different, more technical skills and languages.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with both of you. That we had a data lake, and they were constantly changing. They were constantly changing how they were storing the data, and it was constant. In fact, it's still constant change. So the engineers have to learn new ways of doing things, new processes, new languages, new types of data stores. So if you know how to learn, and that's part of your liberal arts education, is knowing how to learn something, then you will do well in the tech space because it's constantly changing.
I'm going to direct this question to Jake first, being that he's the one who graduated most recently from Furman. And maybe you've had some reflection over this in the last few years, but are there any skills that you use on a daily basis in your job that you wish you would have developed more while at Furman? Or what skills did you develop at Furman that have been most valuable to you in your work?
I think there's a lot of them, and we were talking about like learning to learn, critical reasoning, and just thinking about a process, working cross-functionally. Personally, I enjoyed a lot of the information technology or IT classes I took and some of the programming, but I wish I'd taken more psychology. And I think psychology is applicable in every discipline. I've become a huge fan of pop psychology after college, and I wish I'd allowed myself to chase that path a little bit more. And maybe the theme there is, if your core discipline, you have something else that you're interested in outside of your core discipline, allow yourself to go a little bit deeper in that. But I also think psychology is applicable for a lot of fields in terms of how we think and why we do what we do.
Yeah, I totally agree too. Although I wish I had played golf while I was at Furman. Learned to play golf.
Well,
Psychology.
If we're just getting into regret, Claudine, I wish I'd studied abroad. So
they still have time, so they can.
I spent a year in France, so Jake, you really need to do it. It's absolutely amazing. Really great way to learn, and all these intangible things you're talking about interacting with people, telling stories, appreciating different perspectives. That's a big part of being abroad. So, and if you're fortunate, you can find it. I'm guessing Qualtrics, they're international, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for some companies, you join an international company. There's always the opportunity to go overseas and work for the company. In a lot of cases, we just sent another group of 3 new hires over to our London office, and they're going to be there for a year working in London and just living in London and having that experience. And none of them have ever spent any time abroad. So they're it's a great way to see the world, work in a cutting edge market, and just experience what London's like. So that's a really, really great thing to do if you can do it.
I'd double click on that, Pat, because I'd say one of the key elements of technology is we're becoming more of a digital society in general. But as a software engineer, as a sales rep, as an operations manager, technology is basically moving to a place of work wherever you want. And that started with COVID. And I think there's a lot of mobility in terms of location in the United States, but also globally. Just as an advocate for the field in general, that's a trend that I think any of us in the technology space see. And speaking to your point, Pat, I haven't worked abroad for Qualtrics, but my specific experience is I was from South Carolina, went to Furman in Greenville, said, hey, I want to pop my bubble and go to Utah and explore, which was where Qualtrics was based. Spent 4 years there, absolutely loved it. I now came back and actually helped found our Raleigh, North Carolina office, which is where I'm working now that I've been here about a year and a half. So there's a lot of mobility in that, in the technology space in general. Just another thought to think about.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that I ended up in technology, because I can work from home. I can work anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the constraints we faced on that front is some of our European clients, thanks to GDPR regulations, which are European privacy regulations, they interpret those as requiring our employees to actually be in Europe if they want to work with the data of European customers. Mm-hmm. So that is one of that's one of those areas. Our employees in London, they're working from home in London, but they can't work from home. They can't access the data from the US because they actually have to be on European soil. And now Brexit is just messing that up even more. So I don't know what we're going to do on that front, but that's one of those weird areas where political rules are sort of scrambling. What should be, as you described, Jake, this sort of work from anywhere framework, because now after COVID, everybody has figured out how to do it. And we're actually more effective working remotely than we were when we were all based in the office.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of COVID, I mean, it's, certainly impacting all of us, and we're all having to adjust and adapt and use that word pivot that we're all tired of hearing this year. But I mean, how has it influenced all of you or impacted you, from a professional standpoint and your day to day, but also too, like when you look back on this a couple years from now, like what do you think is your takeaway?
An inflection, I mean, I think it expedited a lot of digital working trends, but an inflection point is always a time to define yourself. It's a time to define your company. It's a time to define yourself professionally. So you pivot and you change the story. And I think technology is an industry that's actually grown a lot during COVID because we know how to change so fast. So we just took advantage of it. You said, how do I sell my technology in a different way that's advantageous to our clients to take advantage of this change? You say, as an individual, how do I learn to work from home or work a little bit differently in a way that I can be more effective? So I think you take advantage of it. And I think the technology sphere in general has done well with COVID. And we're actually probably moving to a place in which that's the norm.
Yeah, I agree with Jake. My company wanted people in the office at least 60% of the time. And they realized that productivity kind of skyrocketed during COVID, during the time that the people are working from home. So I think they needed to see that, that how productive we were, how well we were able to collaborate. And it has just made a huge difference to what they're thinking as far as whether they want everyone to come back or whether we can work from home permanently. So we'll see.
We've seen a very similar change in our leadership. I think to agree, this is a generational thing because a lot of people my age and roughly thereabouts sort of grew up in the working world with the idea that at least part of how you measure somebody's value is the number of hours in their seat. And if they aren't in their seat, therefore they aren't working very hard. And when I look at the people under 25 on this call, I'm guessing that is just scary to you all. I mean, that is not the mindset of a lot of people at our company, a lot of the younger people at our company, because they figure, as long as I'm getting my work done, what does it matter where I am? And they're good answers to that. I mean, there's a lot to be said for getting to know somebody informally and building the social capital when you're in a common workspace. But that's a very different argument from saying, oh, I'm not getting my work done. And that is something that we are, as a company, trying to flesh out in greater detail how we evaluate people's work contributions more effectively, because I think it's actually a more accurate way of trying to get an idea of contributions, and it's going to make us more effective as a company because you're really looking at what people are doing, not sort of some of these more superficial indicators of somebody's hours, stuff like that.
Yeah, FaceTime is what we used to call it. Oh, I'm going to put in some FaceTime. And I think one of the things that I miss is the water cooler talks. Right. Someone will just drop something that such and such is happening and you're like, what? It's something that's useful to you in your job. And so I miss that, those little tidbits and help that you can get just seeing someone in the hall and chatting. I miss that.
Well, think about what the campus is like on Furman when everything was shut down. I mean, you all in your rooms. You couldn't probably have very large groups of people getting together. And yeah, you could connect, you could get your work done, but it just, I'm guessing it wasn't a whole lot of fun. And particularly contrast that to before COVID, when you could interact more with a lot of people and you were more engaged, you knew more about other people, and so that level of knowledge of other people is really helpful when you're working in a company and a team, because they're going to be stressors and challenges you got to work through. And if you know somebody, you're much more likely to sort of work through things constructively than if you're interacting with somebody that you don't know anything about. And that's where the water cooler stuff comes in and can be very helpful.
I'll add 2 points. Digital collaboration, I think that technology is coming. It's much more than Zoom. It's Microsoft Teams, and it's a lot of other progressive technologies that I think will enable us to feel like we're working right next to each other. The other thing, and I think, Pat, this probably goes to your point, I've worked with some new hires. I trained some new people. I have a few people reporting to me. Working globally is more challenging and trying for a new hire. If you already know the operating rhythm of an organization, you know how to get stuff done, you work on your own time. And so I think embracing that as thinking about you guys being new hires, how can I still get that? You don't know what the water cooler talk is, and because you never experienced that, but how can I start to get to know people in a digital way, especially if I'm only working remotely, and leaning into, let's have a little more of a, the side chat of the small talk can be really beneficial in your career.
Yeah, we struggle with that small talk, because before you walk into your break room and somebody's there, you can just strike up a conversation. But you don't, now with the digital, you almost have to schedule
Schedule a meeting.
Yeah, schedule a impromptu meeting, which is just an oxymoron. So that's something we're actually trying to do, and create these opportunities for people to interact informally online. And Jake, I agree that the software is catching up with that, because people are recognizing the need for that kind of additional interaction beyond the sort of work-oriented pieces.
Yeah.
I think before I sort of open up the conversation to the students and any questions I may have, I would just be curious, and this kind of goes along with what we were just sort of talking about, like, what predictions do you all have for future careers in the technology sector? I know all of you have hinted that it's constantly changing, and we know that, but like, are there any predictions you have that might help these students as they're starting to sort of think what the future might look like for them individually on their path?
Claudine said it earlier, but I think security only becomes more important.
Oh yeah,
In the
definitely.
technology sphere, that's you're not physically securing something, you're digitally securing something. So that's one area, very least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think open source, we're seeing a lot more open source, less of the licensed products. And the top software engineers, they all want open source. And we've been told that the top engineers want to come to companies with open source. And that's why they're pushing us all to open source at my company. So, and cybersecurity, of course, with the SolarWinds hack, and then this recent one, the Excellion, the one with the Microsoft Exchange servers. That one, there's so many guys, there's so many parts to cybersecurity. You don't even have to be a software engineer. There are other things you can do within that space. So yeah, I definitely see that companies are spending more on cybersecurity, because the risk is that all they have to do is hit you once. They only need to win once. And there goes your goodwill, and people's lives are upended because their data was stolen, and the stock price goes down. So yeah, definitely cybersecurity.
And if I could add one more, it would be improvements in artificial intelligence. Now, if you've been in the tech space a while, you always hear about artificial intelligence till it bores you. But we're becoming overwhelmed with data, and it's more about how can we use data to find the signal in all of this noise, in all of this distraction. And there's lots of new things. If you guys keep up with tech news, like GPT-3 that's being released, and it's actually open source, what Claudine was just referencing. But I think there's going to be a lot more. I think businesses will double down on artificial intelligence to become more predictive with their insights.
I would agree with Jake about the importance of data. And I think in some ways that's a more applied focus than some of the other areas. I mean, all companies have to deal with cybersecurity. There's no question about it. And AI, machine learning, we're trying to we're seeing that more and more, and that's just going to explode also. But I think one of the areas that our society is struggling with the most is how to how to make use of all the data. You think about all the data that our devices generate on a minute by minute basis. And there's so many companies out there that don't have any idea how to make, how to integrate the data, how to even forget machine learning, just how to integrate all their different data sets and clean them up into some unified whole. That has been honestly the biggest bread and butter of Tresata. We're an intelligent software company. Our software tries to help people manage and monetize data. So we do both parts of it for companies, but probably 80% of our work with our clients is that first part, just trying to help them make the sense of their data in a way that then they can turn into the predictive analytics, machine learning and such. And just there's so many groups and organizations and companies out there that are so struggling with what to do with their data. That's just, Kristen, you asked about growth areas. That's one of those areas that I think is just going to continue to be really relevant because there's so many people who need help in that area.
Oh, I have to agree with you. Yeah, it's like an ocean, an ocean of data, and they don't know how to manage it and apply some structure to it, whatever, we do have a lot of data in our company, and we've been working on it for a while.
Data rich and insight poor.
Yeah. That is so true.
And Kristen, the last thing I would add to your question about the majors and such, you all are definitely in the right field. Definitely in the right field. I think about some of the other majors that a lot of schools have now, and they're really good majors, really smart people. You learn a lot, but if you can take the technical training that you're getting combine that with a liberal arts education, I think that positions you better, honestly, than a lot of other these majors to be successful in today's world. And I know a lot of my former colleagues at Davidson would shoot me for saying that because they're in these other fields, but there's a reason why I'm working for Tresata right now.
If I had to redo it, I would not change anything. I would still go to Furman and major. At the time, it was a melded thing. It was a computer science math type of thing. It wasn't the pure computer science. It really just started 3 years in, I think, and it was a blended computer science mathematics major. So I would not change that. I would do it all again.
That's good to hear. I'm going to open it up to the students. I mean, do any of you have questions that you'd like to pose to the panelists? Feel free to speak up if you do.
Let me ask the students a question. What are you all most worried about going forward? Ideally related to job in the tech world, since that's what we're talking about tonight. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, who raised his hand?
Yeah. One of the things that I find difficult is like getting noticed. Well, I've applied to internships and stuff, but getting noticed based on just a resume. Maybe it's just like a first job problem, but
yeah, every first job says you need 3 to 5 years experience.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. When I look at those kind of resumes for internships or entry level, I know where that you can't expect a lot of experience. If you have a previous internship, fine, but if this is a first one, I'm pretty lenient, and I just want to see, what classes you took. GPA is important, guys. Okay. A lot of companies will not look at you if it's under a 3. I look at a 3.5. So, how to get noticed is, show that you've worked somewhere, even if you worked in a grocery store. If you help your grandmother, yeah, I mean, I don't put that on the resume, but when we talk to you, we want to see the whole person, and we want to look at you and say, would I want to work with this person? Would I want to mentor this person? And that's what the employers would be looking at. And, you know, go in sharp and be personable. Don't talk too much, you know, answer their questions completely and give them a chance to ask follow-up questions. And the expectations are really low for interns. So, you know, well, for me, when I interview them, it's not like I'm expecting this brainiac that knows everything. So, I mean, just be confident. And I guess that's all I can say about that.
I think Pat's going to have the best answer here, but I'll say this really quickly. Think about when you show up to your interview, how can you tell a great story about your experiences at Furman and how you've overcome some level of challenge and what that'll mean. And then also don't be afraid to talk about how you're flexible, you get your hands dirty, you're willing to do all those intangibles that someone wants, and think to yourself, be someone that you'd want to hire. If you talk in a way that you'd want to hire someone, I think you're putting your best foot forward. And then there's a lot of obvious things about research the company ahead of time, ask a good question in the interview, structure your resume only on one page so it looks correct. A lot of the great stuff that Kristen and the team there can tell you. And then Pat, I know you've got something great, I'm sure.
Well, no, I'm Jake. You covered the waterfront on that. One of I'll just add a couple elaborations on one or 2 points. One of the most effective filters for us at Tresata for interns, for full-time hires or whatever, is how much research they've done on the company. We regularly have people who we talk to in the phone screen, and they don't know anything about Tresata. Oh, y'all do data, something like that, and that it's on one level that's fine. But we're looking for people who are really excited about data and really want to join Tresata. And if you haven't done the research beforehand to understand what Tresata is and become excited about it, well, that's fine. But we have a lot of people who actually do that research, and it comes out. They know our core values. They know what our mission statement is. They know the verticals that we work in. And you can find all those pieces of information on our website. So it's not impossible to do, but doing that, showing that level of initiative is a really good signal to send to the person who's interviewing you. If a couple other things, whenever you go into interview, make sure you have 6 to 8 questions to ask the questioner. The odds of you being able to ask all those questions are nil, but the fact that you have those is another great signal to send to the person doing the interview that, yes, I'm prepared. Yes, I have a lot of things I want to ask about, and I do take the initiative to try to prepare for these kinds of things. The final thing I would say at Tresata in particular, for both our internship program, which is for rising seniors, excuse me, and for full-time positions, we always ask for a cover letter, and that cover letter is a very helpful indicator of both someone's interest in Tresata. Is it just do they even refer to Tresata in the cover letter, or is it just a generic? But more importantly, how well can they communicate? Everybody at some point has to write something beyond code, actually has to communicate with other people. And the cover letter can be a good signal to how well you can do that. So sometimes we have people at that point just put in NA or see my resume. And again, that's fine. It may work for some companies, but we really are concerned with and interested in the overall person, like Claudine was talking about. And the cover letter can be another way that you can show that you are more than just have a single skill. You can do a lot of different things. And again, that feeds back into your liberal arts education too.
Yeah, I agree with Pat and Jake. Show an interest in the company, and don't have a generic cover letter. Tail for the company.
Right.
Good question. Any other questions?
Oh. John has a question.
Yes, I actually got somewhere where it's quiet enough that I can have my mic on, so this will make it a lot easier.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So right after I graduated, I intended to take like a year off and do some traveling and get some more diverse life experiences, which I did. I graduated in 2019 though, so right around the time that year was up, the whole pandemic hit and obviously made job hunting difficult. So my question is, how much of an issue in your experience is a gap like that outside of like where you're not working in the tech industry, like specifically right after graduation?
Right after graduation? I wouldn't think it would be a drawback or an obstacle to getting a job. I mean, what do you guys think, Jake, Kat? I mean, I would look at that resume, you know, but that's me. Would you guys look at the resume?
Yeah, I think it also comes to like, you know, the 3 months I did recruiting at Qualtrics, you know, if you're getting hired at an entry level position the same way and expected to get hired in right out of college, and you could talk about how that was some productive use of time for you. Again, it always comes back to what was the point of that? What's the story during that time? You know, I'm probably going to think it's pretty cool if you tell me what you went and did during that gap year. Is
Yeah.
you backpacked in Europe and you tell me all these things you learn, I'm going to be envious, right? So make sure you use it to your advantage instead of you think of it as detrimental. So you can harness that the right way. And hopefully it was, I don't know what you did, John, but hopefully it was something somewhat productive. I'm sure you'll learn something in some capacity.
I think the key thing for us is, are there unexplained gaps in your resume? So if you totally leave it off, that sort of raises, it presents it in a negative way. And oh gosh, this guy didn't do anything for a year. He probably was just sitting at home doing whatever, which is not the case. Present it more favorably that you were having these different experiences and you learned XXXX or whatever. So I think that's really helpful. And then, you know, for the whole COVID thing, you and I don't know, a lot of people of your age ran right into that. And that's like the worst thing. It's like graduating during the 2009, 2010 recession. I mean, it's just where the bottom falls out of the job market and you're struggling. I think and that is unavoidable. But I think one of the things to do that you can do to address that is going back to something Claudine mentioned earlier, is when you're searching for a job during this free time, and that's great, but try to upskill yourself, learn new things. There's so much available online. And if you can show during this period where you're looking for a job, you developed, you got a Microsoft Azure certificate, or you completed an edX learning path on how to do cluster analysis or whatever it is, the fact that you took the initiative and weren't just sort of at home doing nothing, I think is a really positive signal that we would pay attention to.
Oh yeah, and if you've done little projects, just publish them on GitHub, but be careful with that. Don't put any personally identified data on there, but you just show them that you've done something or learned something. As Jake said, you know, you learned something, you know.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions before we wrap up tonight? All right, well, cool. Well, before I let everyone go, I just want to give our panelists a chance to just sort of, if they have opportunities or are aware of ways that you could perhaps enter their companies, whether that's in the near future or, you know, 1 or 2 jobs down the road, I'd love for them to just share a little bit about, you know, some ways you could potentially be a candidate at their company. If y'all wouldn't mind.
Well, is there a way to send them that link for the early career site?
I can certainly do that after the fact. But, you know, I think you have internships and you have that early career program.
Yeah, the early career program. You know, usually when we used to have fall career fairs and the spring career fairs that the universities have, that's when we saw a lot of applications and also for internships at the same time. So I believe my son interviewed in February. So the interviews have already occurred, but they may still go out and look for internships in March. So I don't know if, you know, how can they get that link to the career?
I'll send it to them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'll be happy to send it.
Yeah, you have to constantly check it, guys. I mean, I know some of you are sophomores or whatever, but just check it like in the fall and in the early spring and see what you can find there. Because my company's so big, we do everything. We have everything. And of course, being insurance, we have a lot of security. The cybersecurity is huge and we spend a lot of money on it. So
I'd go back to what Claudine said earlier. Is like a great software engineer is worth their weight in gold. I'm not a
Amen.
software engineer, but there's a high demand for, I think the bulk of the people on this call were software engineers, and there's high demand for that sort of technical competency. But anywhere in technology, it's such a high growth space. Everyone's hiring if it's a good company and they want your talent. So if you present yourself in the right way, you probably got a lot of good job opportunities.
Jake, you're worth your weight in gold in sales. Seriously, seriously, that is just a really hard thing to master. And if you're really good doing that, I mean, it's not as common as the software engineer, but it's still hugely important to a lot of companies. At Tresata, I think for most of you all, there are probably two good entries into the company. One is our internship program, which is intended for people who are just finishing their junior year. And the other is for our entry-level data engineer positions. We have people, as I mentioned, with background in more data. We also have people with background in software engineering that go into it. Sometimes the data engineers, they work on implementation of our software for our clients, which is building out software connections between our software and the client's data systems. But we're also moving into cloud apps. And so that is another area where we're really interested in hiring more people that are a bit more software engineers. The other thing I'll add on this is that we actually paused our recruiting in November and December, and we've sort of ramped it back up January, February. So we're really in the midst of doing a lot of our recruiting for those positions. So they all haven't been filled. So I hope you all will think about applying sooner rather than later. And if you have questions, reach out to me, Pat, at Tresata, or recruiting@Tresata, or just go to tresata.com. That's where you can find the links to all the applications and job ads, things like that. Tresata.com.
and definitely, if you have software engineering questions, please, I'm on LinkedIn. So just ask me and I'll try to answer as best I can.
Jake, there's been a little contingent of Paladins who've gone to Utah over the last few years or kind of been with tricks here and there. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not a recruiter myself in my current day-to-day function, but I know that we have goals to go from like 3,000 to 8,000 employees in the next 3 years. It's just ridiculous growth. And I'm always happy to serve as an advocate. So, if you want to reach out and talk about Furman or Qualtrics in a software engineer or other capacity, I'd be happy to put in a good word for you, and I can personally pass your resume along. Or also connect you with a few software engineers I know that went to Furman that might be willing to chat if you're pretty interested in going the Qualtrics direction. So I'm always happy to talk to anyone and put in a good word for you if you'd like. Also, I'm on LinkedIn too, so that's a great channel. Hopefully all of you guys have LinkedIn.
Yeah, please reach out.
Well, our panelists have been so gracious tonight to take time out of their busy schedules to share some good insight with us. So we really do appreciate 3 of you interacting with us tonight. And you had such great advice and wisdom to share. So we really appreciate that. So let's give you guys a little applause there.
It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And I hope some of these students will reach out to you after the fact. And I'll try to send an email that reminds them of your companies and some of the things we talked about and all of that. So yeah, well, thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. And I hope you gained something by, being a part of this. And thanks again to our panelists.
Yeah, thanks guys. And as the most recent graduate here, enjoy your last year of school. Like, don't move on into the real world too soon. Like, the last year of college is awesome.
It really is.
Enjoy it.
It really is. Enjoy it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.